My name is Andrew, and I run a podcast called Serves You Right. It's all for restaurant workers, bartenders, servers, cooks. So, what I do is I try to find the best and brightest in the restaurant and bar world and share them with you. I've been in restaurants for 20 years, and I've done everything from bartender, barback, all the way up to GM. And I want to make sure that people in their path don't have to search for answers and knowledge like I had to.
I have a lot of doctors and nurses in my family, including my mom. So that was the goal initially. And then I realized that I didn't want to have a lifetime of reading and regurgitating information. Plus, also during that time, going through those programs, realizing as a 17-year-old that I had crippling anxiety. So, for someone who's gotten a lot, like far enough in my life, like, at that point, on merit. A lot of these kids got far because their parents had money. So that was something that I have now since grappled with. I'm like, oh, that's why that happened. But during this time, I then eventually transferred to a tech school just so I could keep, getting classes under my belt and trying to figure out what I want to do. And I was working at restaurants at the time, like to pay my way through college because like my parents are a working class family and like they do well for themselves for sure. But I just never grew up with like things getting handed to me. It's like if you want a car, if you want anything, like you got to work for it. So I was working, like I would have a full class schedule.
I started bartending when I was 19. So I think we'll talk about this later, but I come from a very small town in central Vermont and I really wanted to wanted to see more of the world. I didn't have a shelter growing up, but I really didn't travel and I came from a small town. So when I went to college, I was able to travel. I went to a college called Bangton College and we had a thing called a field work term, which is your winter term. We did work in your field. At 19, I had no field. I just knew I wanted to get out and go somewhere. And I ended up in Guatemala. And, I was 19, so I couldn't experience bar culture in America, but I could experience bar culture there. Long story short, went to the bar every day, totally changed my life. Started bartending at that bar at about 19. Ended up living part time in Guatemala for the next 4 years, bartending in this bar, discovering cocktail bartending when I moved to New York because it was all kind of bubbling up around 2008, 2009. And I had a fine art degree and a philosophy degree, and there were not, nothing was going on there. So I just kind of went whole hog into the bartending thing, and it really scratched a lot of itches for me. Like I've always been very into the idea of trades and being able to do them wherever I am. And bartending, I was like, well, I can do this wherever.
My cousin Helen and her mother opened the Brass Rail Bar in 1937. Now, if you think about that, Andrew, it wasn't even legal for women to tend bar in Michigan until 1945, unless you were the wife or the daughter of the proprietor. So for two women to open a bar in 1937 was quite an amazing feat. They had inherited an ice cream parlor that their father, or Helen's father, opened in 1919. And it was called the Hy-Vee Sweet Shop. And it was the Great Depression, and people weren't eating ice cream sundaes. But people always seemed to have a little extra money for a drink. And in June 15th, 1937, her and her mother opened the Brass Rail Bar. I poured my first drink there under the watchful eye of Helen and my Uncle Charlie and my cousin Tony in 1980. So yeah, it's going to be 46 years later, kind of like the Olympic hockey team.
Yeah, there you go.
46 years later that I go back and pour my second drink. But, when my cousin Maroon passed, who had inherited the bar got sold out of the family for a couple of years and it came available. And I was like, I can't not keep this heritage, alive. I mean, it means so much to Port Huron, Michigan. And it was in 1978. The drinking age then in Michigan was 18. And my mom and dad took me out to dinner and then cocktails at the Brass Rail. And my cousin Tony was behind the bar. So he lined up for me in my honor of my 18th birthday all the classics. Did a sidecar, a Tom Collins in the frosted glass, an old fashioned, and a Manhattan. I don't know exactly what it was, Andrew, but that Manhattan really, it just stuck with me. It resonated. It just brought the whole thing together. And I'll never forget that moment. So what I have today is a riff on a barrel-aged Manhattan, but also using vermouth and Averna and substituting Angostura bitters for some of these Tony Abou Ganim Chicory Pecan bitters. Not yet. world famous, but it was funny. Dale DeGroff once said, he said, I don't know what I was thinking. I was going to get rich one drop at a time.
Yes, yes.
So, but they work really beautifully, with rye whiskey. And this is, again, inspired by that Manhattan that really made me fall in love with bartending. Because you can imagine, as a kid, I went into the brass rail when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And my Uncle Charlie was behind the bar. And I was always in such awe of the bar and of my uncle. I would get a Shirley Temple for putting all the empty beer bottles back in the casings. So that was, I guess, my first bar gig at about 6 years of age. But then when I was able to legally drink at the brass rail, that's, I guess, when that light bulb went off.